Hi, everyone. It's Roberta. Thank you for joining me for our community conversation. I'm delighted that our special guest today is Margaret Sullivan of Margaret Sullivan Studio. And Margaret and I began working on library projects together in Richland Library System in Columbia, South Carolina. And we built many beautiful libraries together. And we have since been working on the PGCMLS strategic framework. There's a link to the draft in the green bar if you'd like to check it out. We've got some little tweaking to do, and we hope to have it approved soon. So the first thing I do, Margaret, with my guests is I have 5 words to describe you, but I actually added another one. So Margaret is passionate. She is empathetic. She is present. She probably doesn't know, but she's really tough. And I'll talk a little bit about that. She's a fighter for democracy. And of course, she is kind, because really everybody we have on the show has been so kind. A little known fact you might not know is even though Margaret is, her practice is in New York City, she is hunkering down in her hometown of Greenville, South Carolina with her kids during the COVID. So we want to talk today a little bit about the role of libraries moving forward. There is so much work to be done with rapid recovery and relief efforts around the COVID-19. And now, even more importantly, is how do we create social impact and social change with everything we know that's happening with our Black and Brown colleagues, friends, and neighbors. So social justice is something we address in our framework. So Margaret, tell me a little bit more about what MSS has been doing as a design firm since you went into COVID mode.
Well, it's interesting. And thank you for the great introduction. I was not prepared, folks out there on the call. So it's a little bit of like, I'm turning red. But Roberta and I have known each other for a long time, and it's wonderful that we've been so simpatico for so many years. MSS, we realized, because we've been so privileged and fortunate to work with amazing library leaders in what we call library land, like yourself, like Melanie Huggins, how we started working together, like Keena McCloy, who really are, like Danielle Milam in Vegas, who really are invested in the library as an instrument for social change. We knew that we were in a position where we needed to step back and think about how we could support you all in this work, because we knew that the day-to-day business as usual was going to change. And so we started to call you all to ask questions. What do you need from us now? Where's the support systems that you all need? So we're on that parallel track to really think about what is the future needs that our library clients will need from us to support them, as well as looking at where we are in New York City, where we've been working with a cohort of community activists in the South Bronx for the past 10 years. And we've been working with the Bronx community relief effort to help support rapid relief efforts in the Bronx. So it's just been a really it's been a hard, challenging time. It's been an important time for the studio to really, have a boots on the ground awareness of what the folks, particularly in the South Bronx, are needing, many of whom have been impacted, extremely by the pandemic around food security, housing security, continued educational engagement, digital inclusion. And I think that work is informing our awareness and understanding of what our library communities also are needing. So it's a good time for that kind of synergy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the work that the studio's been doing.
Yeah, and again, you know, like many small businesses have had to realign and readjust because you are a small business. So you are in the trenches with those small businesses, and I know that is always near and dear to your heart, is supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs. You gave me a great quote that you have quickly expanded into a nimble Swiss Army knife.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about kind of what that implies.
Well, I think what it has enabled us as a studio to do is to think about where are our skills and talents most needed, not what has been our traditional role. And our traditional role as architects, designers, strategic planners has been to work as a consultant to a client group. And I think right now we're in that position, as I was kind of, explaining earlier, that we need to support what y'all are doing, because you're also realigning your virtual services, you're realigning, just the amount of time and energy it takes just to realign the staffing and operations to go from closing down to opening up to supporting extreme scenarios that had not been in the operations before. We business as usual, such as having workshops around facilities master planning, is not where the time or energies need to be spent right now. We want to support where those communities are being served. So I think we're thinking about even more direct ways of using our skill sets. So we've been working with, for example, the Bronx Community Relief Effort to do their social media campaign, which we've never done before. I mean, I said, yes, we'll do it. And so we've been designing the social media campaign, learning from experts around how to be effective, how to cultivate donorship through the social media platforms. And I think for all of us, the question is, where do we align what the community needs most with what our skill sets are and the networks that we exist in, so that we can support the resiliency and recovery efforts of our communities. And it's very risky because as a small business, your profit margins are very slim. And so it's all a risky proposition because you don't know if the revenue streams are going to support those work efforts. And as a business owner, it's a constant balance. But there is a Swiss Army knife expertise to knowing how to use all the federal PPP funding as well.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I can tell you the 5 ways.
Well, one of the things we've talked about in terms of libraries, there's been a couple of quotes. One is that the library we closed is not the library we will reopen. And another word that's been used a lot is, how does the library pivot? So talk a little bit about what you see, since you do work with libraries across the country, what is that pivot and what are those changes that are happening?
So I think there are 2 big themes that I think we can wrap our heads around, and then I'll try to talk about like some of the anecdotes that have been top of mind. I think the one big theme is, and we know this, and I'm not sure we've always been as powerful at practicing this, but the community will tell us what we need to be for them. And so the skill sets around listening, learning, engaging, I think are going to be really, really important to just keep flexing that muscle. The relationships that we have, because I act like I'm part of Library Land myself, but the relationships that we have with our communities, there's no other institution in any community that has that high trust relationship. And so the opportunity that we have to engage in those meaningful conversations around what folks' experiences have been both during the pandemic and what their fears, anxieties, hopes, dreams, aspirations are in the future. I don't think we'll ever, or hopefully, knock on wood, we won't ever have this opportunistic time for that type of engagement. And I've been really encouraged by many of the library systems that have just been picking up the telephone and calling folks and just talking to them. One, to be in support of just their mental health and their we just all need people. That relationship is so critical, and so that opportunity that we have to really ask folks and be in conversation, what were your fears today, what were things that you were pulling your hair out over, and in those first few days and weeks of the pandemic, I think there was some real clarity to just the basic needs: food security, housing security, job security. And then we started to see the needs around support systems for learning. We started to see the needs for digital inclusion, digital equity, digital engagement. And I think particularly for public libraries, as we start to open up, the opportunity to have those conversations with our communities is going to be more valuable than we would have ever realized.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that, we talk about relationships, and I, for one, am very Prince George's proud, because the way that the community has rallied with so many different organizations pitching in to help people where they are has been tremendous. And I think the partnership piece between libraries and nonprofits and government agencies and museums and, on and on and on, has really, really come to the fore, because as you said, we're a trusted entity. We can get the word out. We can help you co-sponsor an event. We can, work together on these relief efforts. So I think that whole partnership piece has really, really been instrumental as a community into starting these conversations and hopefully not only healing from the pandemic, but really starting to uncover how we come together as a human race.
Well, and also I have to give kudos to you, Roberta, for your leadership, that you've been positioning for the library in Prince George's County for the past year. Have you been past year that you've been there? And, I think your awareness that relationship building is the foundational piece of the public library's strength and value is important. The relationships and the leveraging, the partnerships are going to be a big key for public libraries to lead resiliency and recovery efforts in the future. And I think the work that you and your staff created for the framework, when I was revisiting it in preparation of today, we support resilient neighborhoods by embracing culture, inclusion, and social justice. That's initiative number one. And, it's giving us the time to really learn and grow around resiliency. And what does resiliency mean in the context of our values, which the values of a public library are unmatched. The commitment to public good, the commitment to equity, the commitment to social justice, the commitment to opportunity for all, and the power that a public library has at this moment. I mean, this is the moment, this is the moment to shine and to lead and to grow and to be innovative. And so I think it's such an exciting time for the public library.
So talk a little bit more about the term resiliency, because again, this is such new uncharted territory for everybody. Nobody's ever been through this, I mean, I got my hair cut today and it was like I was over the moon because I love my husband, but I got to see a different face. So, and that's just a very, very, simple thing that I took for granted. There's so many bigger topics and more important issues, obviously, but what does that resilience mean, and how does the library play a role in helping a community be resilient?
Well, this is one of those things that I've had to check as they say, check ourselves on. So I think pre-COVID, I was like, the library is there for resilient communities, and I felt so confident that when I said that, and inspired folks around that language. And then I think, as I was saying earlier, that that means now is that we really need to understand what that means for our public institutions and our role. So I've been doing a lot of reaching out to folks in the community economic development arena, particularly those who are committed to social justice and racial equity. And, there's certain definitions that I've kind of latched onto, but one of those is that resiliency is the ability for a community to really bounce back quickly and efficiently and effectively and better than before. Better than before. I think that's a really key term. And whose responsibility is that to make it better than before? I mean, it's ours, right? And so where can the library play a role? And I think that's what is both exciting and it's going to be challenging for us, because I think that trusted role of relationship building is a critical foundation for us to build on. And in the future, I think it's going to enable us to be a more active player in facilitating positive, constructive, resilient conditions. And there are 5 areas that I've been thinking about the library can play a role. And so the first is really just in community engagement. I mean, bringing people together in and of itself, creating community will build resiliency. And we know now that we can bring people together virtually.
Right.
So that's not an excuse.
Right. Just say you don't have a big enough meeting room.
The other is, so one of the things I've learned from my community economic development folks is that communities that bounce back faster are ones that have strong neighborhood grassroots organization abilities. So I think, is the library's role going to be to organize communities to be active advocates for shifts in policy, for shifts in funding? And if we look to what is successful for neighborhoods and communities to get out of this stabilization and into recovery and resiliency faster, then I would suggest yes, because that role as the library will help folks facilitate that efficiency and community strength. And then the other area that I think is going to be interesting to get into is community advocacy. So what is the role of the public library to both facilitate advocacy in communities, and what is the role of the public library to be an advocate? And I think those will be some really interesting places for us to become a more active agent to facilitating resiliency and recovery and community wealth building.
Yeah, and the library has always been, and I think will continue to be, a convener of conversations, but I don't think that's going to be enough anymore. I think it's going to be, there's going to be some changes in why we come together, right? And so, I think, as you put it, the pandemic has really exposed like the deep cracks, right? In just simple things like feeding people. I mean, the care and the breadth of how much we have fed our community in Prince George's County is astounding. But this has just exposed it. We know that there's kids who are hungry every day across our country. So what do we learn from this? And I think the library is, a lot of my colleagues, like you said, across the country, I talk with them as well. And we're all learning things about the library's positioning and how we can have a stronger role and a stronger voice. And I think that's something, it's a little daunting. It's a little more assertive than libraries tend to want to be. But I've seen really great leadership stepping up and say, hey, we need to have these conversations with our staff and with our community, and they're difficult and they're not fun, and nobody wants to be discriminated against, and nobody wants to be hungry, and nobody wants to be unemployed. And so, figuring out, again, I keep going back to those partnerships, and really for us too, as library systems, we employ some amazing empathetic people. You can't
unmatched.
You can't get more empathetic than a librarian. I mean, they're like, hey, you want my shirt? Here it is, and my staff is completely like that. And so really tapping into the strengths of the staff, especially at a branch level, because they know those people that walk in their doors. They know what the community needs, and how do we get them to really have the time and the resources to keep that community feedback and feedback loop going, right?
Right. I mean, I think everything you've said just taps into the opportunity that we have right now. And one of the things that also I've been learning from these community economic development folks is that the cities need what libraries can provide, which is what a city or a county government can't see or hear on a regular basis, is what's happening in the community day by day, block by block, anecdote by anecdote. And all of those deepen the understanding of why we need to be supporting the preventative programs that also build this critical social infrastructure and social resiliency around youth and family programming, summer programming for teens, health and wellness programs, job and workforce development programs. And city managers and city leaders that are putting budgets together, they know these are critical programs, but they also are trying to balance the safety dollars.
Right.
And so in that balance, the voice of the library with the anecdotal evidence to support the need, with that unwavering values of compassion, empathy, kindness, that's a real strength. And and I think for communities right now, not only are our communities needing that voice and needing us to be advocates, but also there's this interesting conversation that's happening about prioritization of our public funds all over the country. Where do we align our resources to show our community's values? And so I think it's a real interesting time for the real strength of the public library to be part of that leadership conversation in our communities.
Yeah, and I think, we know that so many of our customers rely on us for social interaction and to have those conversations because we are a safe place. And I think as we get ready to reopen to curbside services, like many communities, we've been a bit delayed because we had such a heavy caseload of COVID-19. But I think it's not just going to be about picking up a book, right? It's going to be about asking your neighbor, your customer, hey, how's it been going since we last saw you, and what do you need, and what can we help you with? So I mean, it's really about doing a little bit more than we might be normally do, and I think it's really important for our staff to feel empowered to be like having those conversations and not feel like they're invading people's privacy, because the library also holds privacy near and dear. But how do we balance that, right?
So I'm, as Roberta, as you mentioned, I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, which has opened. And for better or worse, because some of the cases, I think the cases have been spiking in South Carolina. But I will say what's nice, and I live near downtown. I've rented a house near downtown. I ride my bike downtown. It's wonderful. And the stores are open. And when the stores started to open, there was like new life because people were coming downtown. And I went shopping in one store with my mask. And they were only allowing 6 people in the store. And it was one of the best shopping experiences I'd ever had.
You had lots of room, right?
Had lots of room. I had lots of help. But I think I was like, oh, it's going to be okay. We're going to ask people how they're doing. We're going to tell people we appreciate you. We're going to enjoy the opening back up together. We're going to tell people we've been thinking about them. We're going to ask them what they need help with. And I think that's also going to be a special moment for communities to embrace each other again and build on those relationships. And
I think it's really interesting too when you talk about, opening up. I've been amazed by how well we've stayed connected virtually with our customers. My staff, I can't say enough about how quickly they pivoted to do everything virtually. And, there's been some great reach. And, we talk about in library land, as you call it, we talk about people, places, and platform. And we were so reliant on our physical places that we didn't really know how much reach we could have with this platform. So, we've had programs where 400 to 600 people have joined us. Well, we don't have meeting rooms. Most of our branches don't have meeting rooms that big. And for those of you who have to, battle DC traffic, you might not get to the library for that program. So it's really been interesting to see how we can, when we get back to the libraries, how we combine the people, places, and platforms now, right?
Yeah, it's going to be so much more fluid, and we're going to be able to use the omnichannel approach. We're everywhere all the time approach, and to have further reach. And I think the thing that I've enjoyed, because I follow all of our clients on all the social media outlets, the thing that I've enjoyed is being able to engage in programs where I don't necessarily have a library card at all of these locations. And I think that's just true, like the Uber economy in action, that y'all can do all that cross sharing of great programs. And the other thing is to also that kind of sharing of programs, to have those coalition of partnerships across the country around the work that you're doing in areas of interest, so that y'all can promote each other's work.
So, for those of you who don't know, we are collaborating with some of our neighbors. For example, we had an event recently with our Eric Thomas, who's a wonderful author. And we had Pratt Library, Anne Arundel, Calvert County, Howard County, and Carroll County all cross promote so that everybody around the state could join us in a program.
Yeah, I think
you can't do that in a physical space. So that kind of also leads me to the question, is virtual a place? And what is placemaking?
Placemaking.
We hear that term a lot, and the library being a place, you know.
So I think, the other thing, the antidote to our conversation is that I think as we are becoming more nimble and flexible and fluid across all these channels, that I think it helps us understand how important the physical place actually is to foster the learning experiences, to foster the gathering experiences that are foundation. And I know we're probably going to be in a period of the stabilization where we're going to be trying to understand and kind of manage the risk of place. But I have to live in the optimism that we're going to get to the other side of a vaccine or our own sense of safety and security, where we're going to embrace place in a new and more intentional and more critical way. And I think the work that we've been doing together over particularly the past 6 years, around envisioning positive experiences for our communities, it's really rooted in how we create place intentionally, and in the kind of design world, we use the term placemaking. Sometimes people say creative placemaking, transformative placemaking, but what it really is about is how many of you out there have thrown a really awesome party? It's about being intentional about how you imagine your community engaging with the physical public spaces and ensuring that the right people are in place, the right resources are there, the right skills and talents, the right physical furnishings, the right tools, all of that, we, by design, by intentional design, has been designed to foster the experiences that you want for that community, which also includes really thinking about what is that experience? Is it joyful? Is it vibrant? Do we want to build confidence in our communities? And with that intentionality, that's the approach to generating wonderful places.
Yeah, and we're fortunate in Prince George's County that several of our buildings are getting renovated and some are getting rebuilt from the ground up, Hyattsville and Bladensburg. And so really capturing the uber localism of a community in their branch is so important. And that's why people always say, that's my library. Like they refer to a branch as that's my library because there's an identity and there's a place of belonging. And I think that's another thing that people have been missing, and that when we reopen that they're going to be so grateful is because the library is a place of belonging. You know, we don't turn you away. We don't say, you know, we don't like the color of your hair, or we don't like that, you know, your shoes that you're wearing. We say, come on in, you know. So I just had a colleague, one of my wonderful staff that I'm talking about, saying it's a second home. And that's what we want people to have in the library. We want people to say, this is where I'm going to go, not only because I can get the book I want, I can use a computer, I can attend a program, but I can connect with my neighbors and I can connect with the library staff in a really meaningful way. And so I think that's really important. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I mean, we can always, Margaret and I, if you hadn't guessed, we could talk all day and all night, but I wanted to see if there's any questions you have for Margaret or for myself around libraries or communities or strategic planning or anything that we've even talked about.
Okay, we have a question. I was also going to put out there, I'd love to hear from you all what y'all think about resiliency, what resiliency means, what you want for your libraries in the future.
Okay, we have a question. Go ahead, say it. Ask it. We are here for you. Oh, I have a question. Any question? Oh, no, this is going to be ongoing. I want to do a community conversation every single week because I really have enjoyed it. And I think it's a really a great opportunity. I'd like to get community members to join me for a conversation. It doesn't have to be somebody who's famous. Margaret's kind of famous. But I mean, just the fact that we can have a conversation about any topic is wonderful. I also like the idea that during this time, we have, yes, other programs too. During the time we've had community conversations, we've been able to really bring on experts in everything from mental health awareness to financial resiliency. So there's a lot of things that I think can be addressed. So yes, I think we are going to have more virtual programming continuing, not just community conversations. Our good friend Heath has asked, when you consider food insecurity, what is the library's role? And normally the library acts as a feeding center, a feeding site, I should say, during the summer. Since we're not open, the schools are taking that on, and they have a ton of sites that are opening this summer for feeding. But I think we could probably do more. I know in Richland, we had farmers markets at several of our branches where local farmers could sell their produce, their fresh food. So I think, culinary kitchen would be fabulous. I think there's some other things around food insecurity and learning about food and health and wellness.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about it a lot in the studio. One, because my right hand, Lena Vong, who's as close to Roberta as I am in our office. Not only is she a designer, but she got a degree at NYU on food systems and food justice. So we've been talking a lot about that intersection between the public library and what she had learned in her work. And I think also coupled with the fact that we realized after the pandemic, that was the critical need in our communities. And that first need needed to be addressed before any stability could even start to form. So, I think a library can serve as convener, connector, problem solver, awareness builder, and, continue to amp up its role and services around the stabilization of folks experiencing food insecurity through problem solving and getting to the root cause as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for that.
Yeah, and then there's also a question about how can the library as an institution reflect the public's voices? When, we've got a lot of voices and we've got a lot of differing views. We know that as well. Margaret, I'm going to let you field this one.
It's the passion. It's the passion of the moment. I think the transformation of our public libraries in the next iteration of the public library will come, we believe, will come from the public's voices. And I think we've, as public libraries, have the opportunity to set up the systems in which public voices can be empowered. I have this great, y'all haven't seen a Margaret Sullivan Studio slideshow because it would have been 100 slides in the presentation. But we have this wonderful slide that we designed that shows the 20th century library is a place to read and be quiet. The 21st century library is both and. It's a place to read and learn and be heard. And so I think that what that means, being heard in a place for the public's voices, are places to encourage conversations, encourage one-on-one interviews with folks in our communities, to encourage communities coming together and having conversations with each other. And I think it's just endless. And I also think there's going to be a role that the public library plays in developing asset-based, strength-based of conversations that are engaging folks to build on the strengths of their communities, the strengths of their cultures, the strengths of their identities, for an honoring and a respect as we develop what our future vision of our communities is in the community's vision, and not from an institution's vision.
Right.
And I think that's a real opportunity. And I think it's going to be a great learning opportunity for all of us in the public.
And I'm going to piggyback on that because I think the libraries in the 21st century are learning that we don't do things for people, we do things with people. So it's not us telling you what we think you need. It's the community. It's us listening to what the community needs. So if you say, hey, I need this program, then that's on us to develop that program. If there's something that's missing, then that's where we need to have that conversation. Somebody asked, what's the biggest lesson the library has learned from COVID? I think what I've learned, and maybe Margaret, you could speak to some other folks that you work with, is that we have a trusted customer base, a community that really loves what we do. And we need to we've been able to listen to what they've wanted and deliver it in a new way. So we set out a survey and asked people, what do you need online? And people said, I need this program, or I need this for my child because they're home and I need the help with schooling, or I need this resource, or I need this conversation to happen. And so it's developing services in a way that is really reflective on what people need instead of what we think is best. And I think that's a huge pivot. And also, again, going back to the technology, and we already knew that there was a digital divide, and now we're really seeing, like, what's the library's role in helping to erase that? For us, we're buying more Kacheets. We're going to have mobile units that are going to offer Wi-Fi. I mean, there's some planning that's happening around how we can get better access for folks.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would hone in on is that it's become very evident that the role of the public library is to help, maybe not even the word help, maybe that's too passive of a word, but really lead the efforts in communities for digital inclusion, and getting the folks at the table that are going to ensure that there is digital equity and inclusion in the communities. It's not good. I mean, the Wi-Fi checkouts, having being able to expand internet access into the parking lots. I think those are the quick fixes, and
right.
But
it's not sustainable.
Right. Yeah. I think that's been evident to all of us that's going to be the critical.
Well, and I think we need to get to a point, and this is bigger than me, obviously, but where internet is a utility and not a luxury. So that's a huge concept, and a lot of, like you said, policy changes. Margaret, this is a perfect question for you. Okay. What tools do you recommend for conducting community asset mapping?
Oh, I love community asset mapping. So I think the first tool is to just get a big map out there. Community asset mapping is one of the easiest community engagement workshops to engage in, because really the place to start is just through gathering everybody that you know and love in your community that's doing awesome stuff with the alignment of shared values, and get your map of your community, post it on a wall, and then everybody gets their stickies, and just you post the community organizations that are in support of the work that you're doing. Community so that might be your yellow, and then you might do a blue, community organizations or businesses that you would want to work with in the future to support the work you do. And then you might get a green and say places and spaces where we want to conduct community engagement. And when you start to do that kind of mapping, the answers just become apparent, and then you start to negotiate the strategies around connecting all those dots. And it's, there's a lot of talk now about activating, capitalizing on the community's ecosystem. And that kind of asset mapping exercise as a foundational start is a great one. Then I think as you build, you're bringing community organizations together and leaders, and we engage in this one exercise where they fill out what we call an organizational brief. And they identify their mission, their vision. If they achieve this in the next year, they throw a party. And then they identify gaps that they're experiencing in terms of being able to support that mission, and then places where they could imagine needing help and support from other organizations in the community. And there's your roadmap.
Right. And then you bring the community in and you say, what do you like about your neighborhood? What are the challenges that you have in your neighborhood? What future do you envision for your kids? Then you really start to grow that, and you have some tools because you've done this mapping internally. So I think that's a really great way to figure out what your community needs and what's already available to you. I think one of the most important thing for leaders is to help eliminate barriers and to give our employees the tools they need to make this happen, because they have the ideas, they have the talent. Our job is just to take those roadblocks out of their way and let them go.
And also even to facilitate that kind of exercise.
Yeah.
That might be another way we can start pushing, that we're facilitating asset mapping. We're facilitating the communities.
So another great question about social workers in the library. Yes, yes, and yes. So we've got some plans, and we're hoping to do some things with our Department of Social Work in the county. But yes, that social work is, it's a very specific skill set. It's work that librarians often feel like they're doing. So maybe more training around that. But when I was at Richland Library, we got our first social worker in the library as part of a grant when we were doing the Affordable Care Act. And it was so successful that we ended up getting a social work department. And then I think there's 3 social works on staff at the Richland Library. And I think that's a really important skill set because it's different, right?
I'm gonna have to pause and do something that I said, Roberta, this would be hysterical if this happens, but my computer is about to die, so I'm gonna move to where I can charge.
Okay. All right. I'll keep talking while you move.
Yes.
That's funny. So another question has come up about, have you increased your book club offerings, and are they led by library staff versus community-led program? I think we have a combination of community-led book clubs and staff-led book clubs. And I think that will continue. If you are in a place that doesn't have a book club, you are welcome to ask us to start one. And boy, I tell you, librarians love book clubs. We could talk about books all day, all night. So if there is a gap, please let us know, because we'd be more than happy to do that.
Ooh, I like this question from Susie.
Okay, what's it say?
Says, what is one of the most unexpected and successful partnerships you've seen in a library?
I want to just talk about an individual experience that I had at Richland Library. It wasn't a partnership, but it showed me how connected we all are. I got a call from a service desk that said, there's a customer who wants to speak with you. In Richland, I was director of planning and projects, and that's where I worked with Margaret a lot. And they said, this woman loves the furniture. And I said, well, great, because I helped Margaret pick out the furniture. And I said to the woman, are you an interior designer? She said, no, but I'm studying to be one. And I can't believe this magnificent chairs in this meeting room. Mm-hmm. And she was doing her program online. And I said to her, how are you getting your practical experience? She said, I don't know yet. And I said, well, I'm working on a project, a new library. Perhaps you could be an intern. Long story short, she gets the internship. She ends up getting a job at this architectural firm as their interior designer. And it was all from one conversation she had with the librarian. And, and that's the power of connectedness of a library. I think there's so many wonderful, wonderful partnerships. We have a great partnership with the Human Relations Commission. They're doing a series with us called What If I Say the Wrong Thing, about cultural awareness. We have a great partnership with Employee Prince George's, and we're getting ready to unroll some new things with them. If I talked about all the partners that the library has, we could go on and on and on. Joe's Movement Emporium is one of our favorite partners. We have a lot of people in the community who want to come together to make our community better. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I wish I had more time to think about it, because I'd probably be able to dig up some things. But I think, to Roberta's point about the furniture, I think what that really tells all of us, that every decision we make needs to go back to the mission and the vision and the values of our public institutions. Because whether it's a book in the collection, or whether it's a piece of furniture, or whether it's a paint color, or whether it's the way we design the carpet, it all reinforces the goals and objectives that librarians have to make their communities better. And I think that's a really valuable and privileged position to be in, to make decisions that increase quality of life for our communities. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that I think unexpected partnerships are a great way to be creative and innovative. And one of the first library projects where Roberta and I actually met was a partnership between the Children's Theater of Charlotte and the Public Library of Charlotte in a project called Imagine On, the Joan Martin Center, which was a partnership for youth age 0 to 18. And out of that partnership, we developed a learning culture for a library experience that fostered project-based learning, that fostered storytelling in all of its vibrant forms. And so the partnership gives all of us opportunities to think differently and think outside of the box and think about the expanded role the library plays to create learning opportunities for all styles of learners. And as an architect, I always say, I'm a maker learner first before I'm a reader learner. I mean, that's oversimplifying things, but we do all learn differently. And the library is such a wonderful place for all styles of learning to happen. And partnerships give us a place to really grow that innovation and creativity.
I mean, just even something simple as somebody's asking us, can we use your space? This past winter at Spalding, we had Operation Warm Coat, and they said, we have all these coats to give away to kids. Can we use your space? We're like, absolutely. And, now that we hope to be an annual thing, we had hot chocolate, we had crafts that were winter crafts, we had books available for kids to take home with them, and they got a warm coat. And this was just a partner saying, hey, I need a space, and the library saying, oh yeah, we can do that. And now it was just such a wonderful experience. We sent flyers home to the elementary school near the library, and kids came and their parents came, and it was just an opportunity to give back in a really, really simple way. But it was like just a really special day. And again, we didn't go out and say, hey, who has coats for us to pass out? It was just somebody saying, I know who we can call the library. And that's what I want our partners and our community to say is, I don't know, but I think maybe the library can help me. And fill in the blank, because we are so multifaceted that we can help in so many ways. I think I like to tell people that if I had a dime for every time somebody said to me, I didn't know the library did that, I would be like on an island someplace, retired with a drink, because people don't realize all of the wonderful things that public libraries do. And I think that could be a good place to close. I'm going to let Margaret do her closing remarks.
Oh,
and then I'm going to say one last thing after that.
Well, my closing remarks are going to be thank you, Roberta. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk libraries, but it's even been a greater pleasure to speak to you all in a county that I have grown to love through working with Roberta and her team over the past year. And I can tell you that you've got a rock star group of librarians who are at the ready to serve you in innovative, creative, and relevant ways, and they're ready to hear from you. So I hope this gets you thinking about what you want your public library to be for your future.
Yeah, and not only do we have fabulous staff, but we also have the support of a wonderful board of directors, library trustees. We have the support of a wonderful county council, leadership with Miss Angela Alsobrook. So we have a lot of support in the community, and I want you to remember that you're not alone. The other thing that I wanted to just say before we sign off is something that was said by our Eric Thomas, the author who wrote Here It Is. He said, just remember that hope is a practice. And so we know this is really, really difficult. The pandemic, the horrible things that have been happening to our Black and brown friends and neighbors, colleagues. And we just got to get up and think that there's going to be hope and that the library is going to help everybody through it, because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. And that's what we will continue to do. So thank you all so much. Have a great evening. Back next